Alright, today I'm going to show you guys how to make a chill bedroom pop type of beat. Alright, so I'll go through instrument by instrument and show you how I made it, then we'll go through the arrangement of the beat. First thing I actually found was these vocal samples.
If you must record my exploits, yes, I shall always remember her.
So this was before I had any instruments or anything, but I thought those parts sounded pretty cool. I think it's from a movie or something, a really long MP3 file that I had. It's like an hour and something. So I just kind of like skipped around in it for fun. And I found these two parts like kind of right next to each other. So I brought it in, chopped it up. Then I was like, okay, let's make some instruments to go around it. We'll see if it fits in. It might not, or it might. It ended up working, so I kept it as is. First thing I found was this guitar loop that I actually didn't end up really using that much in the beat, but I'll play what it sounds like just without any effects. Then I'll show you what I did. So yeah, it sounded pretty upbeat, and I was trying to make a kind of bedroom pop type of beat that's more high tempo, major chords, kind of more happy sounding. So I just added an EQ, added this effect called pancake, which just pans it back and forth from left to right. Added some reverb and then some gain. Then after that, I added some drums to it. The drums are really simple for these type of beats. Drums don't need to be super complicated. It's actually better to have kind of like a steady rhythm. That way it makes it catchier, and then the vocals can stand out. There's this really simple hi-hat. Really like live sounding hi-hat with some reverb on it. Then a simple kick. It's super basic. And then snare is also super basic. There's only a little bit of variation at the end of the loop. And I can't remember if there's anything on this kick variation wise. Yeah, a little bit of variation at the end. And then I actually added a second hi-hat that plays a lot faster than the first live sounding hi-hat. A lot of varying velocities in there to make it sound bouncy. All the drums together with that guitar loop that I found sounds like this. So yeah, at this point I thought it sounded pretty cool, but I thought it was gonna be kind of hard to work with this guitar loop. Like I had to speed it up a lot to fit into the type of tempo that I wanted. Originally it's 90 BPM. The beat is 108 BPM. So I decided to just mute the guitars for now. And then I was like, let me try and find something that's in the same key, which is C major. See if I can figure out something else for this type of specific like vibe that I was going for. I found an electric piano and I just played these really simple chords. So yeah, that's it. There's just one section where I kind of like chopped out the beginning of the chord, so it sounds like this. But the rest is super basic. There's a lot of effects on there, so without effects, it sounds like this. Melody sounds good, but the piano is just really dry. So added a bunch of effects, this like tape effect, and then I put it on this preset called gentle modulation. I think I might have like played around with it a little bit. Added some reverb, some delay, added like vibrato effect. It's just like the stock plugin from Logic, and then an EQ to make it sound the way it does. Then I copied over the same electric piano and I transposed it down an octave. So it's the exact same thing, just lower pitch, and depending where we are in the beat, either the low one or the high one comes in. I'll show you the arrangement after. Then I added these guitar notes. I originally had it on the piano at first, but then I decided I wanted kind of like a guitar in the background. It's actually two different guitars. I'll show you one at a time. So the first guitar sounds like this. And then for the second half, it's the exact same thing. I just played it an octave higher as well, a lower velocity. And then the second guitar is playing the exact same thing. It just sounds slightly different. It's more of like an acoustic guitar. So together they sound like this. The next thing was the bass. So there's two different basses. One is just an actual bass guitar playing this rhythm. So yeah, it just follows the same bass notes as the electric piano. The way that some notes mute was actually a mistake, because in Logic what happens is if two notes overlap, then it'll just cut off the second note a little bit. But I thought it sounded cool, so I actually just kept it as this part. So where it pauses like that, found it gave like a cool rhythm, like as if someone was palm muting the bass. And then there's the exact same bass notes playing on a synth bass, but without the rhythm, so they just extend out for the whole bar. My bad if you can hear any of those honking cars outside. And I did something that I don't normally do, where I played the bass as like a chord, so just on 2 different octaves. I'll show you the bass, what it sounds like. So yeah, the reason I did it 2 different chords like that is because the low one sounded cool for the bass, but I wanted some more of that like weird high-end tremolo type thing that's going on. So I just decided to play both octaves. So yeah, again, depending in the beat, sometimes the synth bass will play and then sometimes the acoustic bass will play. And then the last little thing that I found, minus some other stuff that happens in the outro that I'll show you later, are these drum loops. It sounded cool. I just really filtered it out. It sounds like this without the EQ. So it sounds cool, but it would have been a little bit too much with what's going on with the rest of the drums. So I just decided to filter it out. Same story with this. And then in the outro, there's a couple of unique things that we didn't look at yet. These 2 different bass loops. Then there's this accent pop punk guitar. There are these plucked strings. It sounded a little weird by themselves, but it worked in the beat. So it sounds kind of like choppy and cheap, but with the beat it works. I'll show you after. Then I introduced this other loop of this more intense sounding guitar. And then another guitar loop here. All right, so let me go through the beat section by section and you can understand how it all comes together. So for the intro, I used one of those drum loops that we went over earlier, chopped it up at the end before it gets into the verse, and then I did find a place to use those vocal chops.
If you must record my exploits,
And then we get into the verse. Here, basically all that's happening is we have those piano chords on the lower octave. All the drums are playing, or most of the drums. And then the acoustic bass is playing. And then I chopped up those vocal samples. I ended up chopping that original guitar loop that I found. It's really far in the background, so it's kind of hard to hear. Like I filtered it out and just played this one short section. Might not really be able to hear it that much, but it adds like a little bit of ear candy for your ears to pick up onto something that's different than the rest. Then in the second half, all I did was introduce these guitar notes. And then before it gets into the hook, everything drops out and then we play that vocal sample again.
yes, I will always remember her.
Then into the hook where it switches to the higher octave of piano and then also switches to the synth bass instead of the acoustic bass. And then on the second half of this section, we have one of the other drum loops. And then we're back to the verse, which is pretty much the same as the first verse. I think the only different thing is I like chopped out some of the drums. And then the second half is actually where it gets different, where I introduced that guitar loop. So a little bit of variation with the kicks there too, just to create a little bit of excitement before going back into the hook. And then this time the hook has the guitar loop playing in the back as well. All right, then it gets into the outro where I introduce that drum loop that we had at the beginning there, comes back in, and then it builds up with some of those other instruments that I was talking about before. So yeah, that's the whole thing. Thanks for watching.